The US president has announced that US and India have finalized a trade agreement. Ahead of the announcement, Trump spoke to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The deal comes after several months of negotiations, and the Trump administration levied a steep 50% tariff on Indian exports to the US. 25% of these tariffs, they were for India's crude oil trade with Russia. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said that the US is reducing the reciprocal tariff from 25% to 18% out of friendship and respect for PM Modi. The US president also noted that India would reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the US to zero. Zero is written in capitals. Following Trump's post, Prime Minister Modi also took to social media, expressed delight that made in India products will now have a reduced tariff of 18% in the US markets. A White House official confirmed to ANI that Washington will also drop the additional 25% tariff on Indian imports imposed due to New Delhi's purchase of Russian oil. But he also noted here that India has to cease its purchases of Russian oil, not just reduce its purchases of Russian oil. Clarification made clear. While Trump claimed that Prime Minister Modi had agreed to stop buying Russian oil and increase purchases from the United States and Venezuela, the Indian Prime Minister's statement made no mention of any such move. In fact, none of the statements out of India have mentioned anything on Russian oil. A comprehensive document laying out the complete details of this deal is still awaited. US Ambassador to India Sergio Gor confirmed to Indian media that the total tariff on India will be 18%. And this puts New Delhi at an advantage over its regional export rivals in South and Southeast Asia. India now faces lower tariffs than Indonesia at 19% and Bangladesh and Vietnam at 20%. In fact, it also holds a slight edge over Pakistan now, where tariffs stand at 19%. The gap is much wider with China, which faces tariffs of 34%. Now, this deal comes just days after India and the EU announced what both sides called the mother of all trade deals. While European Union is India's largest trading partner as an economic bloc, US continues to be the single largest trading partner. The India-US deal also comes at a time the European leaders are turning to China. A flurry that began late last year with visits to Beijing by the Spanish king and French president continued with leaders of UK, Ireland and Finland. Germany's chancellor is to follow next month. For Canada and for the UK, it was the first time in 8 and 9 years that a prime minister visited China. Now, there's a willingness to welcome Chinese investments here in these countries, with ties to the US under strain because of multiple reasons, including Trump's ambitions with respect to Greenland. Now, who does this deal really benefit? Because when you compare the statements that have come out from India and the US, they are mentioning very different aspects. What the US has mentioned, a lot of those things have not been mentioned at all from the Indian side. I'm now being joined on the broadcast by Dr. Jayant Menon, a visiting senior fellow at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. Dr. Menon, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the broadcast. Now, as I mentioned, if you see the announcements, the two sides, they're in contrast, mentioning different aspects. Trump mentioned that India will reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers to zero. Let me just start right there. What does this zero imply?
Well, it's difficult to really be sure about what that means, because non-tariff barriers are very difficult to quantify in tariff terms. Tariffs are easy to measure. You can set them at zero, that's fine, but the effect of reducing or dismantling non-tariff barriers is not that clear-cut. So, like with all of these, deals that the U.S. gets into, the devil is in the detail, and we'll have to wait and see what eventuates. It's too early to actually be very sure about what any of this really means, but it's good news on the surface.
You know, earlier when I was speaking, one of our guests, they said that just look at it as a framework of a step in a positive direction for both countries, where ties, at least in terms of economics, have been rather strained in a number of months. So it's a step in the positive direction. That's all that he wanted to read into it. Also, Dr. Menon, the US president said that it's down from 25% to 18%, talking about the tariffs on India. For India, it was never 25, it's 50 and down to 18%. If Russian oil purchases are seized, and they made it clear you need to seize Russian oil purchases, not just reduce them. Trump also mentioned it in his statements. No such thing has been mentioned from the Indian side. Is there ground for discrepancies here?
I think there is a lot of uncertainty in this deal. I mean, this is the problem with, just pronouncements coming from the White House, right? Trade agreements are negotiated over years involving teams and texts that can weigh a few kilograms. Now just tweets and pronouncements that come on a whim, very difficult to actually take seriously at one level. And we have seen this administration being highly erratic, behaving almost childlike, changing its mind, creating new threats at a whim. Yes, to come to your question, there's a lot of room for uncertainty, for discrepancy. We'll have to wait and see what this all means in terms of the details. But again, to echo what your earlier guest said, I think this is a step in the right direction. What we had before with the 50% rate was untenable and very negative for India. And this is a huge improvement from that level.
All right, at least for now, Trump is mentioning 25% to 18%, and there was no mention of 50% from Trump's side. We can take that as a positive sign, too, because there is a lot of enthusiasm regarding it, and it is locked, that's for sure. Finer details are yet to come in. But this is a different aspect I want to also discuss with you, Dr. Menon, the rate at which several US key allies and partners, the way they've gravitated towards China, mostly in the last 1 year, within the last recent months. It's, Canada, UK, Finland, Ireland, France, South Korea. Do you feel this has exacerbated US need for a deal with India, regardless of the kind of statements that come in from the US?
I think it has. The US has seen how other countries have options and choices. The US is an important player, but it's not that important that it can do whatever it wants and expect its trade partners to remain mum or just wait and hope for the best deal. Countries are looking at alternatives, including India, which is a good thing. India negotiating a deal with the EU. And I think if India looks to increase its ties with China, that's also a good thing. I think that is what is happening, and the whole landscape of world trade